Hi, everybody. Diem's heart shatters the moment she realizes Toan doesn't recognize her. The man who once knew her smile, her tears, and every quiet dream now looks at her like a stranger. In his unfamiliar gaze, she feels all the years they shared slip through her fingers, leaving behind an ache too deep for words. She tells herself to be strong, yet every breath feels heavy with loss. If love once lived so deeply between them, how could it disappear so completely? Still, in the silence between his forgotten memories and her breaking heart, Diem dares to hope for a miracle, one small sign that love can survive even when memory cannot. Because sometimes, miracles are not sudden. They are born from patience, pain, and a love that refuses to give up. Some heartbreaks do not arrive loudly. They slip in quietly, like the sound of a door closing behind you, leaving the air colder than before. That morning, Diem woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest. The sky above the village was overcast, neither raining nor sunny, as if it too could not decide what it was feeling. Life, however, did not wait for her confusion. She washed her face, tied her hair, and stepped out to begin another ordinary day. The kind of day where she told herself to be strong, to keep moving, to not look back. People around her saw a calm woman. They saw her working, smiling politely, speaking gently. What they did not see was the way her heart still paused every time she heard a familiar voice in the distance, or the way her breath caught whenever a tall figure passed by on the road. Love, once rooted deeply, does not disappear simply because time demands it to. Diem had searched for Toan for so long that hope had become both her companion and her punishment. She told herself she was no longer waiting, yet every quiet moment betrayed her. In the market, in the fields, on lonely village paths, her eyes unconsciously searched for a face she knew better than her own reflection. And then, fate chose an ordinary afternoon to strike her without mercy. She saw him. Not clearly at first, just a silhouette, a familiar way of walking, a posture that awakened something buried deep in her memory. Her heart began to race, pounding so loudly she was afraid others might hear it. She told herself not to be foolish. The world was full of strangers, after all. But her feet moved before her mind could stop them. When she finally stood in front of him, the world seemed to slow. The dust in the air, the distant sounds of work, her own trembling hands. She called his name. Once. Twice. Toan looked at her. But his eyes were empty. Not cold, not cruel, just blank. As if she were a stranger asking for directions. As if every shared memory, every promise, every tear they once held together had never existed. "Who are you?" he asked. Those 3 words shattered her more violently than any scream ever could. In that moment, Diem understood a new kind of pain, the pain of being forgotten by the person who once knew your soul. Her heart broke silently, piece by piece, while the world continued breathing around her. Yet, somewhere beneath the ache, a fragile question remained, refusing to die. If love was once strong enough to bind them together, could there still be a miracle waiting, quietly, patiently, for its time? Pain does not always scream. Sometimes it follows you home and sits beside you in silence. After that moment on the road, Diem walked away without looking back. Not because she was strong, but because she was afraid that if she turned around, she would collapse completely. Her steps were slow, unsteady, as if each one carried the weight of memories she was no longer allowed to touch. The village looked the same, the trees, the narrow paths, the familiar rooftops, yet everything felt distant, as though she had returned to a place that no longer belonged to her. At home, life continued in its simplest form. Water needed to be boiled, vegetables needed to be washed. Work waited for no one's broken heart. Diem moved through these tasks like a shadow, her hands remembering what her mind refused to accept. Every sound reminded her of him: the clatter of bowls, the creak of a wooden door, even the rhythm of her own breathing. They had once shared these small, ordinary moments. Now they were hers alone. She replayed his face again and again in her mind, not the man he used to be, but the man she had just met, confused, guarded, unfamiliar. There was no recognition in his eyes, no warmth. And yet, there was something else, a flicker of pain when she spoke his name, a brief tightening of his jaw, as if his heart remembered what his mind could not. Toan, on the other side of the village, was fighting a battle he did not understand. Her voice followed him like an echo he could not silence. He told himself it meant nothing. People mistook strangers all the time. Yet his head throbbed, and his chest felt strangely heavy. He worked harder than usual, pushing his body as if exhaustion could erase the questions forming inside him. That night, Lytudiep lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Tears slid quietly into her hair, soaking the pillow she refused to cry into aloud. She wondered how many times a heart could break and still keep beating. She asked herself whether love was meant to be this cruel, to survive even when memory did not. But as the darkness deepened, something inside her steadied. She realized that running away would not heal her, and pretending he never existed would not erase the pain. If he had truly forgotten her, then she would be the one to remember, for both of them. Somewhere between sorrow and hope, Lytudiep made a silent promise. She would not force him to remember. She would not beg to be recognized. She would simply stay, close enough for fate to work, patient enough for a miracle to find its way back. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, disguised as ordinary days. Morning broke over the village with a soft drizzle, the kind that blurred the line between sky and earth. Diem walked to work with her head lowered, letting the cold air brush against her face, as if to wake her from a dream she could not escape. Every step forward felt heavier than the last, yet she moved on, because stopping would mean drowning in thoughts she no longer had the strength to fight. At the orchard, laughter echoed faintly from somewhere between the trees. Life continued its rhythm, unaware of the quiet storm inside her. Diem focused on her hands, on the weight of the fruit, on the simple rule that work could dull pain if you let it, and for a brief moment it worked. Until she heard his voice. It was not loud, it was not calling her name, it was just a voice asking for help, carrying the same tone she once knew so well. Calm, steady, kind. Diem froze. Her heart missed a beat, then raced as if trying to outrun reality. Slowly she turned. Toan stood a short distance away, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands, looking every bit like a stranger trying to survive another day of labor. He did not look at her, not at first, yet something tugged at him, an invisible thread pulling his attention in her direction. When their eyes met, time seemed to hesitate. Neither spoke. In that silence, memories stirred violently inside Toan, flashes with no order, rain-soaked roads, a woman calling his name, warmth wrapped around loneliness. His head throbbed, and he clenched his fists, fighting the pain. He did not understand why seeing her made his chest ache, why the world tilted slightly whenever she was near. Diem saw it all, the struggle written across his face, the confusion, the restraint. This time, she did not rush forward. She did not call his name. She simply nodded, offering a small, polite smile, as if greeting a stranger. That smile unsettled him more than tears ever could. Throughout the day, fate tested them again and again. They worked in the same rows, passed each other in narrow paths, exchanged simple words that meant nothing, and everything. Toan noticed how naturally she moved, how familiar her presence felt, as though his body recognized her before his mind could catch up. As dusk settled, he finally spoke, his voice low and uncertain. "Have we met before?" To Diem's heart trembled, but her expression remained calm. "Maybe," she answered softly. "Or maybe some connections don't need memories to exist." Toan watched her walk away, a strange warmth blooming in his chest. He didn't remember her, not yet, but for the first time he wanted to. And somewhere deep inside, the invisible thread tightened, quietly pulling two broken paths closer together. Some endings are not meant to close a story. They exist to open the heart. That evening, the village fell into a gentle stillness. Smoke curled from kitchen roofs, children's laughter faded into the distance, and the road home glimmered under soft yellow lights. Diem walked slowly, her steps measured, as if she feared that moving too fast would shatter the fragile calm she had finally found. She did not look back, yet she felt it, that presence, that pull, like someone walking beside her in silence. Behind her, Toan stood alone near the orchard gate. The question he had asked earlier refused to leave his mind. "Have we met before?" He replayed the moment again and again, her voice echoing in his chest, gentle yet distant, as though it carried years of untold stories. His head still ached, but beneath the pain was something else, a warmth he could not explain, a longing without a name. That night, memories came to him in fragments, not clear images, not full faces, only feelings. The sound of rain on a tin roof, a woman waiting under a dim streetlight, the way someone once held his hand as if afraid he might disappear. He woke in the middle of the night, breath uneven, heart racing, the name Diem trembling on the edge of his lips, though he did not know why. Across the village, Diem sat by the window, watching the moon drift behind clouds. She placed a hand over her chest, feeling the quiet ache she had carried for so long. She wondered if love was truly about being remembered, or if it was about choosing to stay, even when everything familiar was lost. Days passed, and fate continued its gentle persistence. Toan found reasons to walk the longer road, hoping to see her. Diem learned to meet his gaze without breaking. They spoke more, about work, about weather, about small things that filled the space between two guarded hearts. With every shared silence, something unseen healed. Then one afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the trees, Toan suddenly stopped. His breath caught, his hand pressing to his chest. A memory surfaced, not fully formed, but undeniable. Her laughter, her tears, her name spoken with certainty and love. He looked at Diem, eyes filled with confusion and hope. "I don't remember everything," he said quietly, "but when I'm near you, it feels like coming home." Diem's eyes shimmered, yet she smiled, a real smile, steady and brave. "Then start from here," she whispered. "We don't need yesterday to choose today." And in that moment, the invisible thread completed its circle. Not through memory, but through courage, forgiveness, and the quiet miracle of two hearts finding each other again.